in a fast-paced world. Everyone is in a rush, in a frenzy. Speed thrills, but it also kills. On the games field, we find the players are prone to injury. In all these cases, most commonly reported is there is a fracture of a bone, there is a sprain, there is a dislocation. Many old people complain of pain in their joints. Well, this brings me to the meaning of a joint. A joint is a place of contact or a meeting place where two or more bones are put together. These joints are very important to us in our skeletal system. They impart movement, flexibility, and the study of joints by itself is a specialization. It's called arthrology. Make it clear to yourself, the study of bones is osteology, but study of joints is a specialization itself. It's indeed interesting to know the various ways and the types of joints that are present in our body, and to tell you more about these joints, I have Abhishek.
Do you know how many types of joints are there? Well, I'll tell you. There are 3 types of joints which are based on movement. The first one is immovable joint. The second one is imperfect joint. And the third one is perfect and movable joint. Now, let's go in detail with each one of these. First one, that is the immovable joint. As the name suggests, in these type of joints, there is no possibility of movement. Well, they are further divided into 3 types. The first one is sutures. Sutures are found within the skull. Sutures are zigzag lines which are found where the white fibrous tissue is found. Well, the second one is gamphasis. In this type of a joint, a portion of the bone is fit in other socket. The third type of joint is the synderesis. In synderesis, the portion of a bone is not fit in the slit of other bone. Such type of joint is found in the ethmoid of upper jaw and vomer. Well, this was the type of immovable joint. Now let's know something about the imperfect joint. In these type of joint, there is very less movement and the bones here are soft. Here the bony surfaces are covered with a fibrocartilage or a hyaline cartilage. Such type of joint is found in the pubic symphysis of pelvic girdle. Now, this was about imperfect joints. The third type of joint is the perfect and movable joint. In these type of joints, the bones can move independently. Here, the bony surfaces are covered with a thin cartilaginous sheet and the bones are linked with a ligament lined with synovial membrane, which secretes synovial fluid. The synovial fluid helps in reducing the friction between the bone and hence the movement is easier. The perfect joints are of the following types. The first one is the ball and socket joint. In this type of a joint, the ball of one bone is fit into the socket of other bone. This type of joint always involves a long bone and the ball can move freely inside the socket. The second type of joint is the pivot joint. In this type of joint, the pointed portion of one bone is fit in the socket of other bone. The third type of joint is the hinge joint. It's like a door of our home. Well, this type of joint is found in the knees. This type of joint allows only angular movement along one plane, increasing or decreasing the angle between the bones. The fourth type of joint is the gliding joint. In this type of joint, one bone glides over the other bone at the place of joint. This type of joint is found in the radio and ulna. Well, the fifth type of joint and the last one is the saddle joint. The saddle joint is quite similar to a ball and socket joint, but the ball and socket are not so well developed. Now let's look at these joints in the chart. The first one, which is the ball and socket joint, as I told, always involves a long bone and the ball of one bone is fit into the socket of the other bone. This is found in the pectoral girdle and the pelvic girdle. As you can see, there is a ball over here and it's fit in the socket. This also involves a long bone. This was about the ball and socket joint. Now, the second one, which was the pivot joint, the example of this is the atlas and cranium, which is present inside the head. The third type of joint is the hinge joint, which involves only angular movement, as we have in our knee and ankle and the ends of phalanges. The next type is the gliding joint, which involves radius and ulna, which, as I told, glides over at the place of joint, over here and over here. This is radius and this is ulna. And the fifth type of joint, which is the saddle joint, is present in the metacarpal and carpal of thumb, which is the saddle joint. Now let's look at these joints on the chart. This is the example of a ball and socket joint, the pectoral girdle. This always involves a ball and a socket, which involves a long bone. Another example of this is the acetabulum of pelvic girdle. Here is the ball, the socket and the long bone. The second type of joint, which is the pivot joint, is example of it is atlas and cranium, which is present inside the head. The third type of joint, which is the hinge joint, the example of it is the joint in the knee, the ankle and the ends of phalanges. The fourth type of joint, that is the gliding joint, the example of it are the radius and the ulna. Here the bones glide over each other at the place of joint, that is here and here. Another example is the carpal bones. The next type of joint, that is the saddle joint, the example of it are the metacarpal of thumb and the carpal of thumb.